US President Donald Trump's raft of new tariffs have come into effect and are set to hit some of the United States' biggest trading partners hard. Canada, Mexico and China, which provide the lion's share of the US's foreign trade, have had some of the toughest levies placed on their goods. Around 35% in some cases. Mexico and China are still in talks with Washington to avoid the maximum levies. Brazil, South Africa and Switzerland are facing even higher tariffs. And Trump has announced new duties on India, totalling 50% in response to its continued use of Russian oil. Let's go over to our Delhi Bureau Chief now, Sandra Petersmann. Sandra, India's Ministry of External Affairs is calling Trump's tariffs unfair, unjustified and unreasonable. Has the ministry given any more information on how it will protect its national interests, as it puts it?
Ben, so much is clear. India does not have a magic wand to make these Trump tariffs go away. But if we look at it in detail, the 25% of reciprocal tariffs kicked in today. The other 25% punitive tariffs because of continued deals with Russia, those would be kicking in 3 weeks from now. And of course, this gives India 3 weeks to continue negotiations with the US on the stalled trade deal that they both have been negotiating for months. It also gives India 3 more weeks to look into potentially diversifying the purchase of its crude oil. But one thing also seems rather unlikely, that India will throw its trusted friend Russia under the bus, a trusted friend of many decades. And Modi is in fact under pressure here at home to not give into the bullying of US President Donald Trump.
And it's interesting to point out to our viewers that Europe still imports some 17% of its natural gas from Russia and a quarter of its fertilizer imports. How is that viewed in India?
This is exactly, Ben, what India has been saying all along in all its official reactions, which mainly came from the Ministry of External Affairs. The Indian government is accusing both the EU and the US of double standards, of hypocrisy. India feels unfairly treated. India feels it has been unfairly singled out because China, for instance, is buying even more crude oil from Russia. Turkey is also buying a lot of crude oil from Russia, but only India has been singled out for these punitive tariffs as of now, though Trump has indicated that others might follow later. But many here in India feel that Prime Minister Modi should stand tall and not give in to what many here in India see as bullying tactics of President Trump to get a more favorable trade agreement with India, especially when it comes to agrarian products, dairy products in particular.
Also considering that India is meant to be a close ally of the US, as we heard there. But Trump has also suggested in a press conference that more secondary sanctions are coming. Are Trump's threat having any effect on India's reliance on Russian oil?
Well, that's too early to say, Ben. India's priority clearly is, it has been emphasizing this over and over again, to provide affordable energy for its 1.4 billion people. India's energy needs are rising. The middle class is growing, so there is hunger for energy. And currently around 35% of crude oil is purchased in Russia at very good, favorable prices. Of course, India could diversify, could look to other oil-producing countries in the Middle East, but will those prices be as good as Russia offers? And we will also have to see how does the oil market as such react if Russia is basically falling out as a provider of crude oil. That will certainly do something to oil prices globally.
True. And not only is India a close ally, but also a strategic partner of the US. Where does all of this leave the India-US relationship?
We have certainly hit a very rocky patch, Ben. There has been no public word from Prime Minister Modi as of now, but gone seem the days where the two of them, Trump and Modi, called each other true friends, where they were embracing each other in bear hugs and huge public rallies. India will for sure focus on negotiating the trade deal with the United States. In fact, a US delegation is about to come here to India later in the month for a 6th round of talks. But the path seems to be rocky. There needs to be really good diplomacy from both sides, because it's not only about the tariffs, mind you. President Trump has repeatedly been claiming that he was the one brokering the ceasefire after hostilities between India and Pakistan in May. That is something that India has categorically denied. And a lot of people here, especially analysts, refer to 1998 when India conducted nuclear tests and faced sanctions after. They say the relationship between India and the US is as bad as it was back then in 1998, Ben.
Sandra Petersmann for us in New Delhi. Economist Deepanshu Mohan joins us from the Jindal Global University. Tell us, what is this really about? Is it about Russian oil and trying to stop the war in Ukraine, or is this more about Trump trying to get a better trade deal with India?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I think it's a bit of both. Clearly, the current penalty of 25% that the US has announced is a direct penalty for India buying its oil extensively from Russia. And the Trump administration was mentioning of this over the last few days. There are two goals, of course, clearly as part of the current effort. One is to, as part of Trump's maximalist agenda, use tariffs as much as possible to get India to get a deal which allows US to have a larger trade surplus. India-US trade relationship extends to $132 billion. Just last year, the trade with India exporting far more than what it imports from the US. So clearly, Trump's agenda here is to get as much of access to the Indian market. The first round of trade negotiations did not go as planned. So clearly, the Trump administration gave India a chance or an opportunity to strike a deal. Because that did not happen, because of India's vulnerabilities in areas of agriculture, dairy, you have now a situation where the first 25% was done to give that project. But now I think it's a bit of also an attack to discourage India's growing relationship with Russia of its energy needs.
So is there anything India can do besides weaning itself off Russian oil?
Well, I think it would have to find a way to strike a deal with the US, even if there is a bandwidth for the Indian government to do a more extensive economic partnership with China or Russia for that matter. India has strategically remained more non-aligned, but the India-US relationship goes beyond trade. India's investment markets are very strongly tied to American businesses. There are many areas where India can actually offer a lot more to the US. In fact, there is a growing appetite for American technology, weapons platforms, defense, and there's a huge interdependence where India can add those sweeteners for the US to have a lot in the stake for a trade deal to happen. It's important to mention there is a 21-day period given to the Indian government before the penalty gets applied. So clearly, the Trump administration wants a deal, but it would have to come at the cost of having to do a little bit more on the India-Russia oil partnership. And I think the refiners are already looking at multiple options because it's no longer going to be as cheap buying in from Russia. There are enough options, in fact. India has 85% of its oil needs in imports. It does a lot of oil trade with Iraq, UAE. It now has partnerships with Guyana, Canada, and the US as well. In fact, and that would be one of the areas that India can definitely offer more.
Well, if it does have so many options, why has India become so dependent on Russia, not only for oil, but also weapons?
Yeah, so I think that's an area which now India would be sort of strongly pushed to introspect. I amongst a few scholars, I've written that India was over-dependent, clearly for market reasons, in expanding its relationship on energy. It used to trade less than 2% of its oil needs from Russia before the Ukraine war. Now it's over 35-40%. So that relationship has grown out of, a sort of a market for energy dependence. But having said that, India is also has seen Russia as an ally and friend for many, many decades. So it's not a relationship which it would want to suddenly dissipate. And the Biden administration before had not taken an aggressive stance on India, which now the Trump administration clearly has called India out on. And there is a growing, impatience with the Trump administration with the Russia situation as well. So my sense is that it would be wise for India to find a way to make a deal with the US. There might be compromises, of course, but going and pivoting completely away from the US would alienate itself far more as compared to where it stands now.
Economist Deepanshu Mohan, thank you very much for your analysis.